Welcome to Wings of Love. I am your host, and today we embark on a journey through the shadows of the heart where time and fate intertwine. Our story follows Julian, a 19-year-old with a brilliant mind and a reputation for chaos. After a series of reckless decisions that nearly cost him his future, his wealthy father forces him into the custody of the one man Julian despises most. That man is Sebastian, a 36-year-old professor of classical literature. Sebastian is a man of silence, order, and a coldness that seems to permeate the very walls of his isolated estate. He is a scholar who lives in the past, while Julian is a fire that threatens to burn the present down. As they are forced to coexist, a hidden truth begins to surface from the pages of an old diary, suggesting their meeting was never a coincidence. Let us begin Season 1, Chapter 1. The rain in Massachusetts did not fall so much as it drowned the earth. Julian stood on the porch of the towering Victorian house, his soaked denim jacket weighing heavy on his shoulders. He kicked his duffel bag against the mahogany door, the sound muffled by the roar of the storm. He did not want to be here. He wanted to be back in the city, losing himself in the neon lights and the numbing bass of a basement club. Instead, he was staring at the polished wood of Sebastian's front door, waiting for the man who had spent the last semester trying to fail him out of the linguistics program. The door opened with a slow, deliberate creak. Sebastian stood there, silhouetted against the warm amber light of the foyer. He wore a charcoal turtleneck and slacks, looking more like a statue than a man. His eyes, a sharp and unforgiving gray, swept over Julian's disheveled appearance. He did not offer a greeting. He simply stepped aside, gesturing for Julian to enter. The air inside smelled of old paper, cedar wood, and something sharp like ozone. "You are late," Sebastian said. His voice was a low baritone that seemed to vibrate in the narrow hallway. Julian dropped his bag on the hardwood floor with a wet thud, purposely ignoring the way Sebastian's jaw tightened at the mess. "Traffic was a nightmare, Professor. Or maybe I just didn't want to see your face." Julian wiped a streak of muddy water from his forehead, flashing a defiant grin that did not reach his tired eyes. Sebastian did not rise to the bait. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, antique silver compass. It was a strange object, the casing worn smooth by years of touch, but the needle inside did not point north. It spun lazily in a circle before settling on a direction that led toward the back of the house. Sebastian stared at the compass for a heartbeat longer than necessary before snapping it shut and sliding it back into his pocket. "Your father has paid for your room and board on the condition that you follow my schedule. You will wake at 6. You will assist me with my research until noon. The afternoons are for your own studies. If you leave this property without my permission, I call the police and report you for violating the terms of your probation." Sebastian spoke with a clinical detachment that made Julian's blood boil. Julian stepped closer, invading Sebastian's personal space. He could see the fine lines at the corners of the older man's eyes and the way his pulse thrummed steadily in his neck. Julian smelled of rain and rebellion, while Sebastian was the scent of ancient libraries. "You really think you can break me?" Julian hissed. "I've been kicked out of better places than this morgue." Sebastian looked down at him, his expression unchanging. "I do not wish to break you, Julian. I simply wish to endure you until you are no longer my responsibility. Your room is at the top of the stairs, the last door on the left. Do not touch anything in the study." Julian grabbed his bag and marched up the stairs, his boots leaving damp prints on the expensive runner. He found the room easily, and it was small, sparsely furnished, and freezing. He threw himself onto the bed, staring at the ceiling and cursing his father's name. He stayed there for hours, listening to the house groan under the weight of the wind. Hunger eventually drove him back downstairs. It was nearly midnight. The house was silent, but a faint light flickered from beneath the heavy oak doors of the study. Julian crept toward it, his curiosity getting the better of his spite. He pushed the door open just a crack. The room was a labyrinth of books, floor-to-ceiling shelves straining under the weight of centuries of knowledge. Sebastian was not there. The desk was covered in loose parchment and inkwells. In the center of the desk, resting on a velvet cushion, was the silver compass Julian had seen earlier. Beside it lay a leather-bound diary, its edges frayed and stained with age. Julian stepped into the room, his heart racing, and he knew he should leave, but the sight of the diary pulled at him. He reached out, his fingers trembling as he touched the leather. It felt warm, almost as if it had a heartbeat of its own. He opened it to a random page. The handwriting was elegant, a flowing script that looked nothing like the modern world. I have seen his face in the stars again, the entry began. 3 lifetimes have passed, and still the thread remains unbroken. He will return with the fire in his eyes and the mark of the phoenix upon his soul. I will wait at the edge of the world if I must. My heart is a ghost without him. Julian frowned, flipping through the pages. The dates were impossible. Some were from the 1800s, others from the early 20th century. It looked like the mad ramblings of a man obsessed with a phantom. He turned another page and stopped. Tucked between the leaves was a sketch. It was a charcoal drawing of a young man sitting by a window. The boy in the drawing had the same messy hair, the same sharp jawline, and the same defiant tilt of the head as Julian. The sound of a floorboard creaking behind him made Julian jump. He spun around, slamming the diary shut. Sebastian was standing in the doorway, his face pale and his eyes wide with a mixture of horror and fury. He looked at the diary in Julian's hand, and then at Julian's face. The cold mask he usually wore had shattered, leaving behind a raw, agonizing vulnerability. "I told you not to touch anything," Sebastian whispered. His voice was no longer a baritone command. It was a fractured plea. Julian held the book out, his voice shaking. "Who is this? Why does he look like me?" Sebastian moved with a speed that blurred the air between them. He snatched the diary from Julian's hand, his fingers gripping the leather so hard his knuckles turned white. He didn't answer. He couldn't. He looked as if he were seeing a ghost, his breathing heavy and erratic. "Get out!" Sebastian choked out, pointing toward the door. "Get out before I do something we both regret." Julian didn't move. The intensity of the gaze Sebastian leveled at him was unlike anything he had ever felt. It wasn't hate. It was something deeper, something that felt like a weight pressing down on his chest. It was a recognition that defied logic. Before Julian could speak, the telephone on the desk began to ring, its shrill tone cutting through the suffocating tension. Sebastian didn't answer it. He stared at Julian as the machine picked up. "Sebastian, it's Dean Miller," a voice boomed through the speaker, arrogant and sharp, the tone of a man who owned the world. "I'm calling to remind you that your tenure review is next week. I've heard rumors you've taken in that delinquent son of the board chairman. Don't let your personal charity ruin your career. If that boy causes a single ripple in this town, I'll see to it that you're stripped of your position and your research is seized by the university. Sleep well, Professor." The line went dead. The silence that followed was even heavier than before. Sebastian's hand went to his pocket, clutching the silver compass. He looked at Julian, and for the first time Julian saw the fear behind the professor's eyes. "You shouldn't have seen that," Sebastian said, his voice regaining its icy edge, and though it wavered. "You are a guest here, nothing more. Forget what you read." "I can't forget it," Julian said, stepping closer. "You've been waiting for someone. You think I'm him, don't you?" Sebastian's expression hardened into a mask of stone. "I think you are a troubled boy who is far out of his depth. Go to your room, Julian. This is the last time I will tell you." Julian backed away, his mind spinning. As he reached the door, he looked back. Sebastian was standing by the desk, his head bowed, his hand still resting on the diary. The professor looked like a man who had been carrying the weight of the world for 1,000 years, and Julian realized with a jolt of terror that he was now a part of that burden. Back in his room, Julian couldn't sleep. He sat by the window, watching the rain. He reached into his own pocket and pulled out a small, jagged piece of metal he had found on the floor of the study when he had scrambled to get away. It was a small, silver key, intricately carved with the image of a bird. He didn't know what it unlocked, but he knew he wasn't going to give it back. What will happen next? If you are enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe to Wings of Love before we move to Chapter 2.